No room for politics in Israel's security. The words of Benjamin Natanyahu as he tries to avert a snap election. The crisis began after his defense minister resigned over a ceasefire in Gaza. But can Netanyahu save his right-wing coalition? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Hashem Ahelbarra. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Natanyahu has narrowly survived a possible collapse of his coalition government. Education Minister Naftali Bennett has threatened to pull his party from Netanyahu's coalition after a ceasefire in Gaza. But he announced that he and his party will stay on and give Netanyahu one more chance. If Bennett had resigned, Netanyahu would have been left with a minority government, making snap elections likely. This all began when Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman resigned last week. He was angered by a ceasefire agreement with armed groups in Gaza. He called it capitulating to terror. Israel and Hamas had engaged in one of the heaviest fighting in recent years. But Prime Minister Netanyahu has warned against playing politics with what he called Israel's security.
In a period of sensitive security like this, it is irresponsible to take down the government. Whether our partners decide to take down the government or not, we will continue to act to ensure the security of the state and that of our citizens. We will do so with wisdom, responsibility and determination.
This is what Naftali Bennett had to say when he announced his decision to stay in government.
I know I'll pay a political price. It's not the end of the world. You win some, you lose some. It's better than the Prime Minister beats me in a political battle than Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh beats Israel.
Let's bring in our guests. In Jerusalem, Yoni Ben Menachem, political analyst. In Tel Aviv, Dahlia, Scheindlin, columnist at +972 magazine and public opinion analyst. And joining us from Philadelphia on Skype, Gil Hoffman, chief political correspondent of the Jerusalem Post. Welcome to the program. Let me start with Mr. Yoni. Do you think the coalition will be able to hold together for the time being?
I think for the time being they will be able to hold the coalition, but I think in a few months, 2 or 3 months, they will have to go to early elections because there will be a lot of pressure on the coalition, pressures from the other parties, from the opposition, and also the security situation is not stable, and the problems in Gaza are now maybe on a low fire, but I expect that the problems will start again in Gaza, and the government will have to take fierce actions, military actions, and this will bring the coalition into a dead end, and they'll have to go to early elections.
Dahlia, when you look at the latest statements from the different partners of the coalition, you think that Netanyahu has managed to weather the storm. However, there seems to be a twist here with Moshe Carlon of the Columnist party saying basically that he won't support the Gideon Saar bill preventing president from choosing anyone who is not party leader to become prime minister. Could this be an indication that Carlon is basically saying, I'm not on board 100%?
I think so. I think that all of these kinds of statements and decisions about how to vote on any one bill are primarily a way of the coalition partners saying we accept this coalition or we don't accept this coalition. And over the last couple of days, of course, we all thought for a while that Naftali Bennett and the Jewish Home Party were ready to leave the coalition, and together with Carlon. Now Naftali Bennett changed his mind, and Carlon is sort of left trying to decide, I think, whether to stay in or not. And so this is his way of saying, I haven't decided yet, but everybody knows the coalition is fragile. Netanyahu is not out of the water. Of course, we're in an election year. Either there will be early elections or at the longest period of time, elections will happen in any case by November. The only question is, I think that we expect the coalition to last anywhere between a few weeks and a few months. And maybe, an off chance that it will last a year. But I think Kahlon is certainly the decision maker for now. There could be, as my colleague pointed out, other deal breakers in the future.
Okay. Gil, I mean, it's quite interesting, that change of mind by Naftali Bennett. What do you think triggered that about the man who just a few days ago was saying, basically, I'm not on board unless I am appointed defense minister, but suddenly he's saying, I'm going to give Netanyahu one last chance?
Netanyahu put a tremendous guilt trip on Naftali Bennett. He appealed to the religious Zionist right-wing voters of Naftali Bennett who have been scarred by past elections in which they caused elections that were won by the Israeli left and led to the Oslo peace process and other developments. And Netanyahu had his top people speak to the rabbis that are closest to Naftali Bennett. And Bennett still could be appointed defense minister. Doesn't look like it right now. Netanyahu seems enamored with the job.
Yoni, the way Naftali Bennett came out publicly saying that basically, I'm sorry about what I said and therefore I'm going to give Netanyahu another chance. Isn't this something that could undermine his chances to stay as leader of the party, or could further weaken his own party?
No, I don't think so. I think that the party, Abait Yehudi, is very happy with the Naftali Bennett leadership. I think he miscalculated and he gave an ultimatum to the Prime Minister, and this was a mistake. The Prime Minister put him in the corner and used all his influence to put pressure on the religious leaders of the Abait Yehudi party, and they put pressure on Bennett, and he had to back down. So I think he miscalculated the situation, and I think basically that the politician should not give ultimatum to a prime minister. This was a big mistake for him, but he still has a chance to correct it in the future.
Dahlia, this line by Netanyahu, which is basically scrutinized now by Israeli pundits and Israeli media, when he said that it's irresponsible to bring down the government in the midst of the sensitive security situation. Is there any hint here? What is he directing the nation?
Well, of course, I mean, Israel is always in the middle. Israel is always in the middle of the most sensitive security situation. I think what's remarkable is that year after year, election cycle after election cycle, we are in the most sensitive security situation, according to the politicians. Not to say that there aren't very serious security threats and challenges, but the thing is that I think that for the politicians on the right, they have come to realize that that is essentially their only real selling point. They have not proposed any sort of wider-ranging, longer-ranging plan for a political resolution to the conflict. Netanyahu likes to talk a lot about his foreign policy successes, good economic indicators, but when it comes to a hardcore political fight, security is the thing they always fall back on. And the interesting thing is that, while Israeli society does remain weighted to the right largely, we have just under half of Israelis who consider themselves right-wing. It's still the biggest constituency, and the issue of security still unites them. What we are seeing is that centrist parties, in other words, their voters, are not really buying that line anymore. And so Netanyahu falls back on it to try to shore up his base and compete with the right. But what we saw over the last cycle is that, well, the last two cycles, in the previous cycle in 2015, when we had elections, we now have, after that, we have two parties who are considered centrist. They have 21 seats together. And the previous cycle, we had one centrist party that got 19 seats. Those parties don't seem to be going anywhere. And in fact, most polls show that the center parties stand to grow modestly in future elections that will be held this year, which means that they are taking to some extent from the left. We know that some of those people have left labor. That's why the Zionist Union Labor Party is down so low. But a number of them also come from the right. And I think that it's interesting to consider what are the limits of this security narrative. There are a lot of mainstream Israelis who may even be somewhat right-leaning, but who say, nobody's going to abandon security. There's always a security crisis.
Go ahead.
Time to vote center.
I would like to take that particular point to Gil, which is basically, don't you see it as a gamble when suddenly the Prime Minister starts tinkering around a very complex political landscape where the right wing has been somehow the majority for quite some time, but where the centrists could move or inch a little bit towards the left? Is this something that he's factoring in any decision-making process in the near future in Israel?
Netanyahu believes he could win any election, anytime. And because of that, he's taking other considerations into account. And I'm going to beg to differ with my friend Dahlia. I think one of the reasons why Netanyahu doesn't want to have the election right now, when he talks about some security development happening, what he's talking about is what's going on in Washington this week, where Donald Trump is convening the advisors closest to him on the Middle East, Jared Kushner, his son-in-law and senior advisor, the ambassador from the United States to Israel, David Friedman, who's flown into Washington for this meeting, the Middle East peace coordinator, Jason Greenblatt, about the final content of the deal of the century plan that Trump has been working on for so long. And perhaps Netanyahu sees that plan that's fully coordinated with him as the kind of step that would improve Israeli security permanently and needs to be done right now. If there was an election going on, that plan would be delayed by another several months and maybe never even happen. If this is the key to Israel's security future, then Netanyahu needed to delay this election, but couldn't really explain why.
Yoni, let's expand a little bit further on that particular idea by Gil. Let's suppose the Americans decide to announce the ultimate deal in a way that would tilt the ground in favor of Netanyahu. However, we know absolutely nothing about the components of that deal. Fate of Jerusalem, final deal with the Palestinians, security arrangements, the right of the refugees, and we don't know whether all the key players in the region are on board. I mean, to what extent can we say that this is something that could be conducive to a massive political gain for Netanyahu?
I don't think so. I think that this will be a big mistake if President Trump will present his new peace plan now, in this timing, because the conditions are, the situation is not ready for such a big development. The Palestinians are boycotting this plan and boycotting the administration. The Saudis, Mohammed bin Salman is in a deep problem. There's nobody to move and convince the moderate Arab world to accept this deal. And Netanyahu will have to make concessions in the New Deal. President Trump already said that Israel will have to pay a price for the recognition of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. So I think this is a threat to Netanyahu. And if this deal will be presented before the Israeli elections, it will have components that are not convenient for the right wing, Netanyahu will be in a big problem to accept such a plan.
Dahlia, I see that you would like to jump in there.
I have to say that I disagree. I'm gonna respectfully disagree with both of my friends and colleagues here, and to some extent with you, because I think, first of all, we do know, or we can assess or anticipate some of the aspects of the plan. We know that it's probably going to be something like Netanyahu talks about in terms of a state minus. It will not be full sovereignty for a contiguous Palestinian state. We know that it will involve a large component of economic development, which might sound good, but if it's a replacement or a substitute for full independence, it will not feel like a good prospect for the Palestinians. And we know that Israel already has its capital in Jerusalem secured. We have no idea what it will offer to the Palestinians. For that reason, I think actually it's going to look pretty good for Netanyahu. It's going to look like a victory that the U.S. president proposed the kind of plan that Netanyahu himself essentially talked about back in 2009 in the Bar Ilan speech. Not that different. A very, very circumscribed kind of Palestinian state or entity with not too much freedom. The kind of thing the Palestinians wouldn't accept under any circumstances, first and foremost, because as my colleagues pointed out, they're not talking to the American government right now. As a result, I think that just means it's going to look good for Netanyahu. It's his kind of plan, and the Palestinians will reject it. And the truth is, I think it'll look okay for him, but I don't think it will change his electoral fortunes. It certainly won't detract from them, as I see it, because of the reasons I said. And I doubt if it will bring him any new votes, although it will just reaffirm that he is, in the eyes of his base, a leader of global standing who's tight with Trump.
Gil, against the backdrop of what we've been saying so far, do you think that Netanyahu will pursue a hawkish approach when it comes to Gaza, or do you think that it's about time for him to start somehow a reconciliatory attempt to try to diffuse tension?
Fascinatingly, no, he will not pursue a hawkish approach when it comes to Gaza. And the reason why that I heard from his closest advisors is one word: Al Jazeera. They don't want to have bad pictures coming from Gaza on Al Jazeera when Netanyahu is trying to improve his relations with the Gulf states. He just visited Oman, got received very well there, flew over Saudi Arabia to get there, which is amazing. That's never been done before by an Israeli prime minister. The same week he flew to Bulgaria and didn't fly over Turkey, which is fascinating. That same week, our sports minister was in Abu Dhabi for judo competitions won by Israelis where they played the national anthem of Israel. The same week, the foreign minister of Bahrain tweeted praise for who he called Mr. Netanyahu. And the same week, Israel facilitated money from Qatar coming to the Palestinians in Gaza to ease the humanitarian situation there against the wishes of the Palestinian Authority. We're trying to stop the Palestinian people from being helped. And so this is all part of the Trump plan, Hashem. He wants to move the Trump plan forward. And Dahlia is exactly right. This plan is good for Netanyahu. It's bad for the Palestinians. And Trump doesn't care if it's bad for the Palestinians. This plan is going to be out there. It doesn't matter that the Palestinians aren't going to accept it. Once it's out there, and it's the plan forever, not the Clinton plan anymore.
I'll take that particular question back again to Yoni. You know the problem with the final peace plan for the Middle East. The problem is that basically many people are taking into account the leaks about the components of that plan, but however, they seem sometimes to disregard the broader reaction. We've seen Arab leaders saying something personally or privately, but then when it came to the public, they've been saying something different. Reference, King Salman bin Abdulaziz yesterday saying that the Palestinian issue is one of the key components of Saudi foreign policy. Basically, he was hinting that he would reject anything that would further upset the Palestinians. So unless you can gauge a general reaction from the Arab world, how would you sell something as being successful?
I think this whole plan is a non-starter as far as the Palestinians are concerned, and I don't think that the Arab countries, the moderate Arab countries, will come out and support it without getting a green light from the Palestinians, which they will never get. And I disagree with Gil about Netanyahu attitude towards Gaza. Netanyahu, this is an election year, and he will do everything to win the elections. If it means that he will have to go out and make a small or a big military operation in Gaza, he will do it. I don't think. I think that we see the last polls, the public opinion polls. Most of the people in Israel are think that Netanyahu did not function well in this last crisis with Gaza, and they're taking the right-wing attitude. So if this is the will of the public, Netanyahu will follow it in order to win the election, and I think that he will not take into consideration the relationship with the Arab countries. What's important for him is to win the election, and if this requires a military operation in Gaza, he will do it.
Dahlia, don't you see the man as more constrained than ever when it comes to...
I won't disagree.
Just go ahead, Dahlia.
Yeah. I don't disagree at all that Netanyahu basically wants to win elections more than anything else. I will make 2 points. I think that on the polls that came out showing high discontent with both the defense minister's handling of the Gaza crisis and of the prime minister's handling of it, I would, as a pollster, would take those with a grain of salt because people were very discontent. They wanted a more hardline response, but that was in the heat of the moment. And I'm not sure how much stomach the Israeli public really has for another long, devastating war that might result in Israeli soldier casualties, some civilian casualties, terrible press. And I'm not sure if Netanyahu really wants that either. So I sort of agree with Gil that he might not go for escalation. But I will say that the one thing he will not do, which because it won't earn him any electoral points, is look at any other more long-term, bigger picture resolution for the question of the Palestinian issue. Looking at the Trump plan is not a long-term resolution. It's probably political theater. And in terms of Gaza, he's much more likely to go for either a short-term or a long-term ceasefire, doing some sort of indirect negotiations, as we've seen, and all with the purpose of essentially treating Gaza as an entirely separate entity, fragmenting the Palestinian issue into many key, component parts, and trying not to look at it, and also trying to convey to the Israeli public that we don't have to look at it as a larger question of the fate of the Palestinians, which Israel still, is largely responsible for.
I see your point.
So he's really taking the idea of long-term, broad political resolution off the table.
You touched upon what I was basically going to ask you about, and I'll therefore have to move on to Gil. You seem to be pretty much confident he's going to pursue a robust policy when it comes to Hamas. I'm not a military analyst, but then when you look at the botched covert operation in Gaza, it was really an ultimate humiliation. It led to the defense minister to resign. It almost cost Netanyahu his political legacy. Don't you think that he would have to think 100 times before launching any military strike against Hamas?
Yes, I don't expect Netanyahu to launch any serious military strike against Hamas, Israel. Those intelligence operations happen all the time. That was a routine kind of operation. And the response on the Hamas side was very harsh, 460 rockets fired in 24 hours. They did that because of the money. $15 million arriving, facilitated by Israel. The Hamas wanted to make sure to not be seen as lackeys, collaborators with Israel. So as a one-time thing, that they did what they had to do in order to flex their muscles. Now that money will be arriving regularly every month. The humanitarian situation in Gaza will be eased. A situation of calm has been created that can facilitate a peace process.
Mr. Yoni, with Israel Beitenu out of the coalition, we're left with the Likud, the Jewish Home, Columnist, Shas, and the United Torah Judaism. Let's talk about the future scenarios. Option one, these snap elections. Do you think that the right wing would still be able to maintain a quasi-monopoly of the political life in Israel?
Yes, I think once there are elections, the game will start again, and if Netanyahu will win, I think that Lieberman will try to be in the coalition. Depends how many votes he will get, but we're starting the game all over again. What Lieberman will do now is do his best to topple Netanyahu's government and have early elections, because he wants to gain and come back to the game. So he will do everything, and he will cooperate with the opposition in order to have early elections.
Dahlia, in one of your articles, you said that the Second Intifada created a seismic shift in Israeli politics, with the right wing standing at something like 45 to 46%, and that the centrist, we're talking about those who could be tethering toward the right or to the left, representing something like 25%, and that the left somehow standing at 15%. Well, looking at the math, it doesn't seem likely that the left will ever be able to resurrect anytime soon in Israel.
Yeah, I mean, your original question about does the right continue to hold a monopoly on Israeli electoral politics, the answer is yes, because as you point out, and as I've seen in my surveys over the years, the right currently stands at just below 50% of the total public. Among the Jewish public, it's over 50%, slightly, and the left stands, you correctly pointed out, 15% for the Jewish public, though. If you look at the entire public, the left reaches about 1/5, let's say 20%. In other words, the left is not about to achieve an electoral victory anytime soon. The best a left-winger might hope for is that the center and the left combined get enough votes to balance out or even overcome the bloc of the right. And, they do have common enough interests that if they get just a few percentage points back from the right, the parity between the center-left bloc with the right is pretty close. But it's a long shot. And the truth is I see a much higher chance that the center will grow. But those center parties are mostly center-leaning right. Kahlon's party and possibly Orly Levy's party together will certainly go into a right-wing coalition. And of course, as for Yair Lapid and Yesh Atid, which is viewed in Israel as a center-left party, he's gone into the coalition before with Netanyahu, probably has no problem doing so again. So it's hard to imagine a scenario where the left is even a participant in a governing coalition in the future. Extraordinary
times indeed, and it will be really interesting to see how political life in Israel would move forward in the coming weeks. Dahlia, Scheindlin, Gil Hoffman, Yoni Ben Menachem, thank you very much indeed, and I really appreciate your insight today. And thank you too for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. For further discussion, go to our Facebook page, that's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. For me, Hashem, Ahelbarra, and the whole team here. Bye for now.